Have you ever felt like the setting in the story you were reading or the TTRPG that you were playing wasn't living up to its full potential? Maybe there was no Underdark made of a labyrinth of lava tubes, or perhaps it was because there was no secretive druidic tribe of nomads crossing an endless desert, or maybe there were just no flying cars. Either way, my name is Hunter Grundman from Side21, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about world building. This can mean everything from the cosmos and the climate to capital cities and world religion. Hopefully everything you need to make your TTRPG and story setting dreams come true. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Just a quick reminder before we get too far into this adventure, be sure you're following us and liking the video. It really helps us out and we super appreciate it. You can also find us on Twitch at Side21 TV, and you can head over to Side21.tv to check out our merch store. Get this cool hat and lots of other cool merch items. And without further ado, let's jump back into the video. So, when I think about world building, I kind of break it down into three major categories. The first one of those categories is going to be your physical world itself. Things like mountains, oceans, rivers, caves, the weather. The second major element of world building is inhabitants. What are the life forms or people who inhabit your world like? What are their cultures and traditions? How do they govern themselves? What are trade routes looking like? And then the third element of world building is going to be the metaphysical world, the magic systems you may have, the deity systems you may have, and how all of that is going to work for your world. However, I like to start with the physical part. I feel like it's the initial building block of the world. So let's jump into some geography and start building a world. So, as you start to think about the physicality of the world that you want to make, you have a few decisions you need to make before you can start drawing out your map. The first one is, do I want to have a large single landmass? Do I want to have continents? Are there going to be continents that are specific to a type of weather that my planet is going to have, or a specific climate? But for the sake of this video, we're going to stick to a single landmass, and we'll have different regions just to keep it a little more simple. So I'm going to start by just drawing out a simple landmass here. I'm going to use a large brush at first just to get a basic shape going, and then I'm going to reduce the size of my brush so I can get some details in here. Leave room for things like lakes and bays that you can have coming off the ocean. Things like this, and that way you can add some story beats, cities, details, whatever you want. Maybe you have a peninsula that comes down over from this area, another kind of cove that's just naturally developed in the land here, and we'll call that kind of our basic landmass. A couple more lakes up here in the northern part of our world. And then we'll start to think about the other elements of world building. I'm going to start by throwing down some mountain ranges here. And again, you know, feel it out. Think about the way that you want water to flow in your world. You know, where do you want rivers to be? How do you want the lakes of your world to be fed by water, so to speak. But yeah, we'll just throw in some maps here. The next thing I want to think about is, okay, well, we've got some mountains. What about having some forests in the landscape? So we'll kind of draw out a forest here. We'll click in a bunch of our little trees here. I'm using a website called Incarnate, by the way, very popular in the TTRPG map making space. I do recommend it. I like it a lot. They have a free version, and you can also subscribe to get more features. Either way, we're going to throw in some forests here. I do think the northern part of my world, I want to have some snowy areas, so I will go ahead and throw in kind of some snowier trees to signify maybe some northern cold forests up this way. The next thing I'm going to do, I should have prepared a little better for this, but this will give you a chance to see some of the details here in Incarnate. I'm looking for snow and ice. So yeah, we'll throw in some snowy areas, maybe around this lake up here. Perhaps that's a frozen lake that you can tie into your stories. But yeah, we'll have this whole northern section here above these mountains. And you can even use Incarnate to throw in snowy mountains as well. I'm not going to do everything exactly perfect, just give you the guys the idea here. Yeah, so maybe you have this snowy section of your map up here. Perhaps also you have maybe in the southern parts of your map a desert. Perhaps this peninsula is a desert. So we'll fill that in with some of our sand. And then we want to think about one other thing for this map anyway, and that is rivers. So we'll think about that. You know, you have rivers that are ocean to lake kind of things. You also have rivers that are created from water running off of mountains and down into rivers. Oftentimes those rivers will run into lakes as well. So over here we'll kind of have this river and lake system built that works its way down to the ocean. Create like a little archipelago here. Maybe you have some water that runs down here, and maybe this river splits and joins up with that river there. Yeah, and kind of thinking along those lines, maybe you have just one river that works its way kind of east to west, almost all the way through your continent, splitting down in between these trees, running along the farthest edge, eventually joining up with this one. But yeah, just some things to think about there. You know, where are my water sources coming from? Where are my trees? What's snowy? What's deserty? And, you know, the world is your oyster, no pun intended, when you're doing these kinds of things, because you can make whatever you want and your story and cities and everything will develop from here. But this is just a basic map we can work with to start with. Now, just a couple more notes about terrain as you are thinking about the way that you're building your map. When different climates exist on your map, you're going to have different flora and fauna that exists in those different areas. So for instance, in your snowy area of the map up north, you may have very few outgoing produce routes, or not much is going to be grown in that region. Animal life may be minimal, and you should think about how that will affect the cultures of the people in that area. Similar to the desert, again, not many crops are going to be in that area, very inhabitable for plant and animal life, so perhaps not a lot coming out of that region either. However, you can spice that area up. Maybe it's got caves that are known to have valuable crystals on the inside, things of that nature. And then in your middle, you know, temperate climate areas, especially near bodies of water, you'll probably have a lot of plants and animals inhabiting those areas. And you need to think about how that's going to affect what cities are going to be where on your map, how that's going to affect people traveling through your world, and how it will affect your story in the long run. Not only will the climate and regions of your world affect the plant and animal life that exists in those regions, it will also be a factor of weather involved. So in your desert area, probably not going to see a lot of precipitation, very light rain. And then in your northern area, you won't probably get a lot of rain, but you'll get a lot of snow. And how will that affect the region and the people that live there? Is your world somewhere that gets a ton of rain? Is rain a rarity? Do you get things like ice storms or sandstorms in the desert? How is wind a factor in this world? So yes, all things to think about that will affect the cities and inhabitants that you place in this world going forward. So now that we've discussed the geography and weather and different regions of our physical world, it's time to jump into the meat and potatoes of world building. This is going to be the inhabitants of your world. Where are the villages? Where are the cities? What trade routes exist between those cities? What is the economy like? What is the culture of people from different parts of the world like? How do those cultures interact with each other? What languages might these people speak? All of those are going to factor in to the inhabitants part of your world. It will also help you develop a history and give you a lot of jumping points for story beats going forward. So let's go ahead and jump back to our map, and we'll place some villages and cities and talk about how they work with the geography that we've put down on the map already. So as we look now again at our map, we want to think about our different kingdoms or inhabitants that we want to occupy this world, think about where those kingdoms might be located, and then once we have our capital cities down, you'll think about where would there be satellite cities or supporting cities for this kingdom, perhaps to add in trade routes and the flow of goods to support your economy. So I'm going to have 3 different races of beings on this world. We're going to have some humans, we're going to have some elves, and then I'm going to have a race of mysterious lizard people that live out in the desert. But, so starting with humans, I'm going to think about the capital city first and where I would place that. For me, I think between the river here and the bay is one of the better spots to put this. It allows for the flow of goods to reach this capital city via river. It's also got the nice bay there where they could deploy their navy or have trading ships coming in and out from there. Once we've decided on our capital city, we want to think about, okay, well, where are the supporting cities for this kingdom? Where are cities going to pop up naturally that would help support the flow of goods? They're usually, you don't have cities for no reason. Typically, cities are either functional as a trade hub or a area where a certain type of resource is being acquired. So thinking about that for our city here, I think I would want to have kind of a fishing community here along the lake and ocean and river. It's surrounded by water on 3 sides. Definitely a good place to have some fishing going on. I might have a mining community or 2 up here along the mountains that will also, kind of do the same similar thing. And here in this valley, I think, kind of some farming communities might make sense. I think that's too many though. We're going to place 1 over here. So we'll have 1 in between the rivers here, 1 kind of in the middle, and then 1 in this valley here between these mountains. Think about how beautiful that would be with the mountains in the view. So thinking about that, you can decide if you want to have roads when you're creating your maps, things like pathways to show how these people get around. Obviously, this has got a lot of rivers in this world, so there's probably a lot of boat travel going on. But there's probably existing some roads as well. Okay, so that kind of shows, a human kingdom. This is showing a little bit about like the flow of goods as well, where some of these satellite cities are located and how they support the capital city. So thinking about maybe some of the other inhabitants of the world, I'd like to put my elves up in the snow. They're going to be snow elves. So we'll say their capital city looks like this. Obviously kind of choosing a stamp that shows different architectural style. That's kind of all above table, as we would say. But yep, just showing that's an elven city there in the snow. Perhaps it's got some kind of satellite cities as well. We'll say maybe they've got a mining kind of community up along the river here. Maybe there is a city on the coast up here that specializes in fishing, and then perhaps they've got a couple of their own little farming communities below the snow line here as well, and then maybe showing some roads for the elves as well. And again, when you're building your world, this is all up to you. You may have some major differences in what's going on in your world. This is just kind of showing a basic concept of maybe how this smaller than the human kingdom elven region up here operates. And then finally, I wanted to have kind of a lizard kingdom down here in the desert. And we'll say this city is to the far east over here and just exists here on the edge of the desert. They've got some rivers there. Perhaps they've got a few small communities as well over here that are going to create this region. One other thing to think about when you're placing your cities is, I like to pepper the map with a little bit of, things like ruins, just to give the idea that there's more going on here. So I will go find a little ruin stamp. And yeah, maybe you've got some ruins out here in the open space. or you can have, all sorts of different things existing in the spaces between your kingdoms that lead to adventure. But we're going to jump off the map now that we have created some cities, and we're going to talk about the flow of goods, economy, and culture now a little bit more. So, now that we've got our cities on the map, there are a few more things you want to think about when it comes to the people who live in those cities. You want to think about how the region that they live in will affect their culture. How is it going to affect their history and traditions? How is it going to affect their attire based on the climate? You want to think about the languages that the people in these cities speak. What are their naming conventions? Do they all have a similar sounding name, or are they completely different? Could be any combination of things based on what you want your world to be. Like we said in the other segment, cities are typically in a place for a reason. So, cities that are along bodies of water are oftentimes focused on trade or fishing agriculture. Cities that are near mountains typically can be mining communities. You want to think about cities that are in valley areas being more farming communities. You want to think about how those communities feed goods to the capital city and each other. You want to think about the fealty. They may be paying taxes to the kingdom on these goods, depending on how your government is set up. The things that make your smaller satellite cities different from your larger cities are going to be the composition of those cities as far as architecture goes. Capital cities, of course, are going to be large, walled cities, probably with multiple districts, a military presence, castles, educational facilities, things of that nature, where your satellite cities may be more narrowly focused on the resource that they're gathering, just perhaps anything from a small fishing village all the way up to a medium-sized town that may have a castle and walls of its own, but typically not as many community buildings, not as strong of a governmental presence in those smaller satellite cities. You also want to think about, does your kingdom have physical borders? Do you have a wall that goes all the way around your kingdom? Does it have imaginary borders, like state lines and things like that? Do you want to think about, does this kingdom and this kingdom get along? Are they trade partners, or are these two kingdoms at odds with each other? Having kingdoms at war can bring all kinds of interesting aspects to your stories, but having kingdoms that work together can also, on the other side of the coin, add interesting things as well. We also placed some things like ruins on the map. You want to have a history in your world. And of course, some stories will be the birth of a new civilization or society, but for your typical fantasy stories, you will want to have some sort of history to your world to provide the inhabitants of that world caves and ancient ruins to delve into. And we'll get a little bit more into that in the next section, which is the final section of world building, the metaphysical, where we're going to talk about magic and religion and the gods, and how those things will affect your economies, cultures, and the adventures that you can go on in your world. So, when you're considering the metaphysical aspects of your world, those things that exist either in idea or outside of the forces that exist on your physical world, these are things like magic system and gods and the way that religion works, and how does that religion affect the people that live there. Starting off, you need to decide if you would like to have deities in your world. Some worlds choose not to have gods. Some world builders choose not to have gods. Others really enjoy having a diverse array of gods. Gods typically come in one of a few forms, but don't be afraid to get creative. One of those forms is idea-based, probably the most common in fantasy spaces. Things like gods of the forge, gods of magic, gods of the forest, things that are very specific to an idea. Sometimes there are also racial gods. If you think of, for instance, the Drow from Dungeons and Dragons, pretty much all of the Drow worship a single god, Lolth, a goddess in this case. And you can also have gods that are more primordial based on the raw elements of nature, god of fire, god of wind, things like that. And then once you decide what kind of gods you want to have in your world, typically you're going to think of what inhabitants in my world are going to serve these gods, whether it be through worship, or otherwise. And you also should decide, are my gods walking among the people, or have they ascended to a divine realm beyond the reach of the inhabitants of my world? All things to think about. And when you think about the religions that will form based on these gods, there are a few things to think about. Is this a militant religion? Are these people fiercely devoted and committed to ridding the world of people who don't follow their religion? Perhaps it's a more peaceful religion where the people in your world just seek to do the right thing by everyone that they come across. Also, how is that religion affecting the economy? Are tithes being paid? Are the religion and the politics of your kingdom connected in any way? Another thing to think about is magic. Is your world a magic world? Is it a system based on nature where people are able to draw from the power of the world itself to fuel their magical powers? Or perhaps it is a divine magic that comes from those gods that you established. Lots of different things. People like to put ley lines in their worlds, where magic is more concentrated in certain parts of the world than others, and it affects how that magic is used. There are a million different magic systems out there, so I certainly am not going to go into them all. Feel free to do your own research, because there is a wealth of information and ideas that could either inspire you to come up with your own magic system, or use a combination of some of the elements that you find out there in the work of others. However, magic is definitely a question mark for your world. Do you want it or not? And how is it going to work? One of the last parts of the metaphysical part of your world is space, the area outside of your physical world, the astral sea, as it's sometimes called. Do you want to have other civilizations and other planets existing out there in the cosmos that interact with your world somehow? Is it a place of complete mystery where no one has explored yet, but maybe society is on the brink of crossing that border? Is this where the deities live, perhaps? Any combination of things that work for your stories and your world are available to you. But that's just a quick kind of breakdown of the metaphysical aspect of world building, and then combine that with the inhabitants and the physical world, and you are well on your way to building a world of your own. Of course, you can dive so far into each little aspect of all the topics I've discussed, but this is just a general overview, a broad brush guide to world building. I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments what you thought. If there's anything I should add or any other videos you'd like to see on this topic in the future, please let us know. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a good night.